Hello, this is Pastor Matthew Woods from Grace Lutheran Church in New Albany, Indiana, and this is the weekly devotion for April 15th, 2024, Tax Day. Render to God what is God's is today's title. Of course, in the spirit of the day, I thought it would be kind of fun, actually, to talk about Matthew 22, where Jesus is challenged on the subject of taxes. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. But what exactly is rendered, right? That's our thought today. So today I'm going to start off by reading the passage from Matthew 22, 15 through 22. It says this: Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in words. And they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully and do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. In that love, don't you love the flattery in that? Verse 17. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why do you put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax. And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, Whose likeness and inscription is this? They said, Caesar's. Then he said to them, Therefore render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard this, they marveled, and they left him and went away. Now, keep in mind, there are three groups represented here in this passage: the Herodians, the Pharisees, and the followers of Jesus. The Herodians are a non-religious party that supported the dynasty of Herod, thus their name. They were Jewish supporters of the Roman government and were very much in favor of this tax. On the other end of the spectrum were the Pharisees, a religious party who believed that in a strict observance of the law and of the oral traditions that were handed down to them, such as the way they wash hands, for example. This group was a separatist group from Rome. They did not want to be under Rome. Neither one saw Jesus as Messiah, even with all the signs and miracles that Jesus did. These first two groups were at opposite ends of the spectrum, and yet they come together to trap Jesus with this question. The third group that is represented by the disciples were no doubt at the temple at this time with Jesus, nervously and silently watching and learning as Jesus fielded as many questions to trap him that day. So we have the disciples as the third group. The kensos, was the poll tax, by the way. This imperial tax that we're talking about was exacted upon Jewish citizens as all conquered nations and all conquered territories of Rome had to pay. If you were effectively a non-citizen, you paid this. It was considered a special badge of servitude under Rome, and it was despised by the Jews. This tax was especially galling to the Jews because Caesar was often portrayed as a god, and the coin that with his image was inscribed with this word divine, implying that he was a greater god than the one that they had, and they hated serving him. And the Lord knows that when Paul instructs Christians to pay their taxes in Romans 13, those monies were used for troubling things back then too, right? The nation of Rome was not exactly a godly place. Using the tax as part of the question posed to Jesus was a trap because in the minds of this mixed crowd, the answer to the question especially pointed out where Jesus' loyalties really were, with God or with Rome. The trap was simple, or so it seemed. It was, and you got to understand, this was carefully crafted. They worked on this question to trap him. If Jesus were to answer that it was not good to pay the tax, he could immediately be arrested for subverting Rome, to replace Caesar or not call him a deity, a number of things. To answer the other way was to incite the Jewish people against Jesus and ruin his popularity because so many were opposed to this tax. Instead, Jesus sets up the challenges challengers in their own trap in a way that they answer their own question. Show me a coin, Jesus says. The image on the coin was that of Caesar's, and the inscription was that of Caesar. The very image of Caesar was never allowed in the temple, which is ironic here. Once Pilate tried to bring a bunch of shields into the city with with Caesar's image on it, and the people rebelled. And now they've got one of these very images being carried around in their pockets, like an idol in a pocket kind of thing. The image of the coin was Caesar's. So give back to Caesar that image that belongs to Caesar. Give back his image. And give back to God God's image on it. And he's talking about you and I. They're really two separate things. But the image ultimately comes back to the image of God, doesn't it? That's what's fun about this. So do we what, Pastor? Do we give God what is God? See, that's the important question today. What do we carry around in our pockets that have other images on them? Those things we probably shouldn't be carrying around, for example, in our hearts and our minds without a thought. We often get ourselves into a twist over the way we see government waste taxes. Are we any less guilty of the waste that God gives us, wasting his gifts? Forgiveness, for example, is very heavily spoken about in places like Matthew 18. Jesus speaks of the unmerciful servant. He is forgiven an unbelievable amount of money, but he ends up loving very little. He ends up loving his neighbor very little. He treats him quite badly, in fact. Can we say we are as generous as Jesus has been to us in our mercy to others? In Luke chapter 12, 16 through 21, Jesus speaks of a wealthy man who was given a great crop. He was already wealthy. He was a wealthy farmer. Instead of thinking of the Lord and honoring the Lord's generosity with a great generosity of his own, the farmer decides instead to build bigger barns for himself, to hoard it all, if you will, all of God's gifts, and to eat, drink, and be merry. Can we say that we have been generous in our love we've received from Jesus, in our patience, in our words, in our own self-control? Are we a grateful people or stuck on our sourness over things we can't really control anyway? How much of what the Lord gives to us, we who bear his image, is given to God and in honor of God in the way we love others or live our lives for Christ? How much? The distinction between the followers of Jesus and the other groups is well spelled out in Matthew 25. The believers and the unbelievers are distinguished by what they give to the Lord. Visiting the sick people in prison, visiting the sick people or the people in prison. They clothe those who need clothes. Both believer and unbeliever alike ask, when did we see you needing these things? The goats did nothing about it, but the sheep gave to the Lord what is the Lord's. They gave to those in need what the Lord had supplied them with. A home to invite strangers in, clothes to clothe others who needed them, making time to visit the sick or those in prison. What these sheep do becomes instinctive to them, flowing out of their character, shaped by the Lord himself. They know the will of the Lord, unloving thy neighbor. They hear his voice and they follow it. These sheep do not consider the work of the Lord taxing, but worthy of a faith-filled response, as a form of thanksgiving for the gifts they have been enabled with, that they have been given, though, more than enough to share and love others. Can we say anything less as Americans, that we don't have things to share? As Jesus does in so many of his parables, Jesus draws a sharp contrast between the two kingdoms, the kingdom of this world and the kingdom of Jesus. Jesus is a king not of this world, as he told Pilate in John 18:36. And we are citizens of that kingdom who yet live in the kingdom of the world. So, for now, we give to Caesar what is Caesar's and render to Jesus what belongs to the Lord. That's the call. Romans 13 reminds us that it means remaining good citizens. In fact, Romans 13:7 says, "Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor." Are we not to respect and honor the people in authority, even when we don't like them, even those like Caesar? According to this, we are. Just as we would serve Jesus by offering a visit to the sick or clothing the poor, so too we honor Jesus by honoring the Lord under the authority that he has established, he has given. Like Caesar, our modern government reps and officials are by and large corrupt, immoral, and power hungry like any other time in history. They spend our money on many contemptible things. There is no argument about that. Their abuse of their authority will not go unpunished, but vengeance belongs to the Lord and not to us. Our calling is not to vengeance and not to be angry. Our call is to honor that authority, to respect those who need respecting. They tax our patience, of course, our conscience, our incomes, and so many things. I get that. We, on the other hand, are called upon to pray for them, to vote, and to encourage one another in the Lord above all else. So on this tax day, I would offer a reminder that rendering unto Jesus is good, even if that means we must continue to live in patient endurance for the Lord's return under a very imperfect government. Give thanks that we have something from Jesus to render back to Jesus, namely his grace, his cross, and his resurrection. We have reason to render and reason to give grace that overflows through us to others. And so today I say, happy rendering. May God bless our week. May God bless our tax season. And may the Lord bless our week ahead. And I look forward to seeing you again next time. So take care now. Bye-bye.